The following is an Investor Brand Network audio production via our audio press release solutions. As a multifaceted financial news and publishing company, Investor Brand Network utilizes its network of more than 5,000 distribution partners as well as other corporate communication tools to introduce public and private companies to a wide audience of investors, consumers, journalists, and the general public. Investor Brand Network's platform connects the investment community with companies that have great potential and a strong dedication to building shareholder value. The following audio press release may feature a client partner of Investor Brand Network. Investor Brand Network may have been compensated for the production of this audio production. Please be sure to read our entire disclaimer for full disclosure.
Welcome to Network Newswire editorial coverage titled GW Pharma Sells for Billions, Psychedelic Company Following Similar Path. In May of 2013, GW Pharma listed on Nasdaq selling 3.5 million shares at $8.90 each to investors betting that GW was charting a profitable course as a biotech developing new drugs from cannabis-derived compounds. Legal cannabis was only beginning to gain momentum at that time, and while countless companies saturated the market as would-be growers and distributors, etc., GW was taking a more difficult route of drug development with much greater upside if successful. The strategy paid off as the company received FDA approval for the first-ever cannabis-based drug in June of 2018. There are some notable similarities between the evolution of the legal cannabis market a decade ago and the current status of psychedelics, longtime illicit drugs that are now being evaluated for their therapeutic potential by a handful of upstart companies. San Diego-based Tryp Therapeutics Inc, OTCQB, ticker symbol TRYPF, stands out, not only for its still small valuation, but also because it has a successful management team that, much like GW, is charting its own course in the space. Major investors have not been shy about speculating that biotech is going to produce some psychedelic-derived blockbusters, as evidenced by the attention given to COMPASS Pathways Plc, CMPS, MindMed Incorporated, MNMD, and newly public ATAI Life Sciences N.V, ATAI, any one of which could do for psychedelics what GW Pharma did for cannabis before being acquired in February by Jazz Pharmaceuticals Plc, JAZZ, for $7.2 billion. Venture capital has been pouring into psychedelics, rising from under $100 million in investments in 2019 to $346 million in 2020 and already $329 million in 2021. Jazz Pharmaceuticals, paying $7.2 billion for cannabis drug maker GW Pharma, has investors looking at early-stage psychedelic companies. Tryp Therapeutics is one of only a handful of companies moving into Phase 2 clinical trials with a psychedelic compound. Tryp has a seasoned management team, board of directors, and scientific advisory board with experience throughout the drug development process. Value resides in drug development. A traditional biotech such as Jazz acquiring GW Pharma was a bona fide inflection point for the cannabis industry, as simultaneously a stamp of approval was put on both cannabis-derived compounds and high valuations for drug development companies working with Schedule I drugs. GW was a true trendsetter with its Epidiolex, cannabidiol, for controlling seizures in rare forms of epilepsy. The new drug generated more than $500 million in sales in 2020 and is expected to top $1 billion in the near future. The brilliance of GW is that it used decades of anecdotal evidence about cannabis to synthesize a natural cannabinoid for a large market opportunity where conventional drugs have fallen short. Unfortunately, President Richard Nixon signed the Controlled Substance Act in 1970 and put a damper on clinical research of not only marijuana but psychedelic drugs as well, including psilocybin, a compound of magic mushrooms, MDMA, known as Molly or ecstasy, lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD or acid, and N-dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which were all lumped in as Schedule I drugs deemed to have zero medical use. A willingness from the FDA to evaluate cannabis-derived compounds for their clinical merit has led to a resurgence in clinical research proving this categorization wrong. not to mention lending to a shift in removing the negative stigma of cannabis in favor of what could be transformational medical advancements for areas of great unmet need. A similar trend is underway with psychedelics, which are already benefiting from the path carved by cannabis drug development pioneers such as GW. This month's IPO of ATAI Life shines a spotlight on the growing interest in the drug development side of the space. The company raised more than $200 million through a U.S. initial public offering comprised of 15 million common shares priced at $15 and targeting a valuation of approximately $2.3 billion. Big Pharma comes to psychedelics. Many companies are angling to capitalize on the emergence of psychedelics for therapeutic indications, but only a select few pharmaceutical companies are entering Phase 2A clinical trials, including Tryp Therapeutics Inc, TRYPF on OTCQB, or TRYP on Canadian Securities Exchange. Tryp's pipeline is comprised of its psilocybin for neuropsychiatric disorders program that includes TRP-8802, the initial oral formulation of psilocybin for Tryp's Phase 2A clinical trials, and TRP-8803, a proprietary formulation with novel method of administration planned to be used for Phase 2A trials. With world-class management and advisors, Tryp is advancing its PFN program into Phase 2A clinical studies, a de-risking factor not seen in most peers. Furthermore, Tryp is differentiated by evaluating indications outside the limited mental health conditions that others in the space are pursuing. Tryp's leadership is one that is fitting for a major pharmaceutical company. The executive team has degrees from some of the nation's top institutions, including University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School, Loyola, University of Connecticut, Notre Dame, BYU, and Vanderbilt to provide a sampling. Before making their foray with psychedelics with Tryp, management experience has come from careers founding or holding leadership positions at the likes of Genzyme, Unigene, Tarsa Therapeutics, Dow Chemical, Immunoprecise, Consonance, Delmar Pharmaceuticals, and many more. The company's board of directors and advisory team mirror the same type of credentials. In aggregate, the company has decades of experience in drug development from the bench to commercialization and capital markets. Its scientific advisory board is led by Robin Carhart Harris, Ph.D., and has expertise in everything from psychedelics and the initial target indications of pain management and eating disorders. Leveraging the network of the team, Tryp has partnered with Albany Molecular Research for manufacturing services for synthetic psilocybin and Alchemy for analytical methods and final formulations in preparation for clinical trials. Eating disorders and chronic pain on tap. Tryp is pursuing two indications representing large opportunities that have proven mostly elusive to conventional drugs. Eating disorders have been particularly difficult, even against the backdrop of 9% of the global population, a figure consistent in the United States, developing an eating disorder at some point in their lives. Tryp has partnered with the University of Florida to conduct a Phase 2A trial of TRP-8802 for patients suffering from rare and other overeating disorders where there are extremely limited or no treatment options available today. Jennifer Miller, MD, a professor in the Division of Pediatric Endocrinology at University of Florida, is serving as the trial's principal investigator. Expectations are that patients with binge eating and hypothalamic obesity will respond favorably to the neuroplasticity effects of TRP-8802 in combination with psychotherapy. These types of eating disorders have limited treatment options, and Tryp has partnered with Fluence to provide design and training for the psychotherapeutic portion of its clinical studies. Pain market ripe for disruption. Keeping with its theme akin to the GW approach of targeting difficult or unattended diseases and disorders with a fully synthesized regulated compound, Tryp is also developing TRP-8802 for chronic pain conditions, including fibromyalgia, phantom limb pain, and complex regional pain syndromes. These are maladies that affect millions of people as part of a global chronic pain market forecast to grow 6.5% annually to reach $151.7 billion in 2030. The fibromyalgia treatment market alone is expected to exceed $3.6 billion by 2026. Perhaps no other market is ripe for innovation like that of chronic pain, where opioids and other drugs with well-known negative side effects and addictive properties dominate. A safe and effective alternative has blockbuster potential. Clinical trials are being planned to evaluate if TRP-8802 can modulate chronic pain through action in the descending pain inhibitory pathway and increase neuroplasticity. The chronic pain indications that Tryp has selected share a common characteristic of having pain signals that originate from the central nervous system rather than from localized trauma. Follow the money to drug development. It's encouraging to see a large amount of capital being deployed to support innovation in drug development for compounds derived from cannabis and psychedelics. According to CB Insights, venture capital investment has been growing dramatically in the last few years, rising from under $100 million in 2019 to $346 million in 2020 and already $329 million in 2021. Following the money shows that a large portion of investment capital is being directed to companies pursuing regulated drug development of these compounds for medical indications. COMPASS Pathways Plc, CMPS on Nasdaq, a UK-based company with a patented synthetic version of psilocybin for use in treatment-resistant depression, is indicative of investors' appetite. COMPASS is advancing its psilocybin therapy program under an FDA Breakthrough Therapy designation awarded in 2018 and has recently published additional information on the strong safety profile of its treatment. The company completed its initial public offering in September, selling 7.5 million shares priced at $17 each, above the expected range of $14 to $16 for a market cap nearing $1 billion. By mid-December, shares of CMPS were at a record high of $61.69. Mind Medicine, MindMed Incorporated, MNMD on Nasdaq, which listed on Nasdaq in April, is taking a multidisciplinary approach to psychedelics. The company is extremely active in its development efforts. For instance, in recent weeks, the New York-based company has added multiple team members, received approval from the local Swiss Ethics Committee for a mescaline study, and completed its pre-IND meeting with the FDA to select generalized anxiety disorder as the initial indication for its upcoming Phase 2b trial for its LSD therapy. ATAI Life Sciences N.V, Nasdaq ticker symbol ATAI, has been the talk of the psychedelic space lately. The German company, which counts PayPal founder Peter Thiel as one of its biggest investors, completed its IPO this month, raising $225 million by pricing shares at the high end of the range at $15 each. ATAI is different than others insomuch that it is effectively a holding company that invests in companies developing mental health treatments, currently overseeing 10 therapeutic programs, including 5 using different types of psychedelic chemistries. Jazz Pharmaceuticals Plc, JAZZ on Nasdaq, is a prime example of commitment to the emerging cannabis drug development market, recently paying $7.2 billion in cash and stock for GW Pharma. With U.S. sales of Epidiolex topping $500 million last year and the recent launch in Europe under the brand name Epidiolex, management is expecting the franchise to cross $1 billion in annual sales in the near term. Moreover, Jazz is conducting research of Epidiolex for additional indications, which will not only add to corporate coffers should they reach commercialization, it will also lend further validation to the legitimacy of cannabis-derived compounds to further strengthen the chemistry's reputation as a medicine. The aforementioned companies are instrumental to a growing body of research proving the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics and other Schedule I compounds, which is a welcome development to millions of patients who are currently suffering from diseases with limited and ineffective treatment options.
This audio press release is an original broadcast provided by Investor Brand Network. as multifaceted financial news and publishing company that delivers a new generation of corporate communication solutions, including news aggregation and syndication, social communication, and brand awareness tools, Investor Brand Network may receive payments for the services and solutions provided to its client partners. You should assume that the owners, officers, and directors of Investor Brand Network or financial analysts mentioned in this audio production may hold a position in and may intend to trade the securities on their own accounts. This audio production is not an offer or recommendation to buy or sell any securities mentioned in this audio production. The information in this broadcast is presented solely for informative purposes and is not intended to be or should it be construed as investment advice. As in all investments, investment in the featured companies carries an investment risk. Listeners should review the companies thoroughly with a registered investment advisor or registered stockbroker. This audio production by Investor Brand Network is not purported to be a complete study of the featured company or other companies mentioned. Information used and statements of fact have been obtained from featured companies and other sources but not verified nor guaranteed by Investor Brand Network as to completeness or accuracy. Such information is subject to change without notice. Please see our full disclaimers and disclosures at investorbrandnetwork.com.